family torn apart. Two brothers get into a fight. Suddenly, one pulls a gun and kills the other. Noel Williams sat down with the family as they try to put into words exactly what they're going through.
I didn't know if I should grab the shooter, or if I should grab the baby, or if I should grab Tamir, but I was willing to die. Those words hang in the air of a Cleveland courtroom. A mother torn between impossible choices, describing the moment she watched one son murder another.
If I should grab the shooter, or if I should grab the baby, or if I should grab Tamir. But I was willing to die.
October 3rd, 2023. A moving truck sits in the driveway of a new home. Boxes stacked, furniture waiting. A fresh start for the Hale family. But within minutes, that driveway would become a killing ground. Pinky Hale stands frozen, her grandchild in her arms, as her 19-year-old son Rodney pulls a gun on his older brother Tamir. What happens next defies comprehension. One shot, Tamir drops to his knees. All right, knock it off, he pleads. But Rodney doesn't stop. He keeps firing and firing. The medical examiner would later count 16 separate gunshot wounds. 16. Let that sink in. That's an entire clip emptied into his own flesh and blood while their mother watches, paralyzed with horror. His whole face was like, "I cannot believe my brother shot me," Pinky would later testify. What transforms a typical brotherly argument into a brutal execution? What happens in someone's mind when they don't just shoot once in anger, but continue pulling the trigger 15 more times? This isn't just another murder. This is the complete destruction of a family in under 2 minutes. A security guard with a spotless reputation, a 1-year-old child who will never know their father, a mother who lost both sons in a single moment, one to death, one to prison, and a 19-year-old who claims he blacked out during the killing, only realizing what he'd done the next day. Drop your theories in the comments. What makes someone empty a clip into their own blood? What snaps in the human mind to make this possible? Tonight, we're going deep into the case that left Cleveland in shock and a mother with nothing but grief. The story of two brothers, one described as a ray of light, the other now serving 20 years for one of the most brutal family killings we've ever covered. To understand what happened that October day, you need to understand Tamir and Rodney. Two brothers from the same home who couldn't have been more different, night and day. That's how their mother Pinky Hale described her sons. Two brothers sharing the same blood, but walking completely different paths. Tamir Dial, 23, had his life together. A security guard at a local Cleveland school, he'd earned such respect that when news of his death broke, the entire school shut down for a day of mourning. The principal's statement cuts deep. Kid after kid and staff after staff shared such sweet memories of how Tamir impacted them. He was a man like no other. Forever 23, Tamir was the guy who showed up for his family, for his 1-year-old daughter, for anyone who needed him. Like the show Everybody Loves Raymond, his father, Mark, explained, "That's him. Everybody loved him." The kind of son who, after finishing his shift, would come straight over to help his mom move into her new place. The kind of brother who, despite their differences, still maintained a relationship with his younger sibling. Then there was Rodney Curley Jr., 19. While his older brother built a reputation as reliable and trustworthy, Rodney was, in his mother's words, running in the street, bad crowds, troubling associations, a life heading in a dangerous direction. But here's the thing. They weren't enemies. They argued like brothers do. They lived under the same roof. They helped their mother together. Whatever their differences, there was nothing in their history that suggested one would murder the other. The Hale household wasn't perfect, but it wasn't broken either. Pinky Hale clearly loved both her sons deeply. Even after watching Rodney gun down Tamir, she would later tell the court through tears, "I love Rodney so much and I love him so much. And I hate that all this is happening, and I love Tamir so much, and I miss them both so much. Friends described the brothers as having normal sibling friction. They'd argue, they'd make up, nothing that raised red flags, nothing that screamed danger. But there was one critical difference between them that would ultimately prove fatal. Rodney carried a gun. And when Tamir called him out on it during their argument, "You're not anything without your gun," something snapped. The brothers who shared a home, who helped their mother move furniture that morning, who had grown up together despite taking different paths, would be forever divided by 16 bullets and a moment of rage that no one saw coming. Two brothers, one dead at 23, one facing 23 years in prison, a mother destroyed, a child left fatherless, and it all started with a simple disagreement about where to place furniture in a new home. October 3, 2023, a day that should have been marked by new beginnings. Pinky Hale had secured a new home in Cleveland, a fresh start, a new chapter for her family. The U-Haul truck sat in the driveway, loaded with the physical pieces of their lives, waiting to be arranged in their new space. Rodney had been helping his mother all day, loading and unloading furniture, carrying boxes, doing the heavy lifting. Tamir, coming straight from his security job, arrived later to lend a hand. A family working together to build something new. The brothers moved between the U-Haul and the house, carrying items, deciding where things should go. And that's when it started. A disagreement about furniture placement. Where the couch should sit. Which bedroom got which dresser. The kind of trivial argument that happens in thousands of homes every day. They were having a disagreement, not loud or fighting, nothing, Pinky would later tell reporters. She was inside the house, holding Tamir's 1-year-old daughter in her arms, half listening to her sons bicker outside. She didn't worry. This was normal brother stuff. They'd argued like this 100 times before. Besides, they were new to the neighborhood. She didn't want to make a bad impression with family drama on day one. But the argument continued. From inside, Pinky could hear their voices getting more heated as they moved items from the U-Haul. Finally, concerned about the neighbors and wanting to settle things down, she stepped outside, still holding her granddaughter. What she witnessed next would replay in her nightmares forever. The brothers stood by the U-Haul, face to face, the argument escalating beyond furniture placement into deeper territory. Then came the triggering words from Tamir, words that would cost him his life. "You're not anything without your gun." A challenge, a truth, a fatal mistake. Rodney's response was immediate and chilling. "I don't flag, I kill. I shoot to kill." In that moment, something changed. A line was crossed. A decision was made. Rodney pulled out his gun and shot Tamir in the shoulder. Pinky froze, her granddaughter in her arms, as her oldest son fell to his knees in shock. The look on Tamir's face, described by his mother as pure disbelief, said everything. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not between brothers. Not over furniture. Not ever. All right, knock it off," Tamir said, trying to de-escalate, trying to pull his brother back from the edge, trying to make this not be happening. But it was too late. Something had broken in Rodney. Something had snapped. And what followed wasn't just violence. It was overkill in its most literal form. As Pinky watched, paralyzed with horror and indecision, Rodney continued firing, shot after shot after shot. When Tamir turned to try to escape, Rodney kept shooting him in the back. He begged him to stop. He begged him over and over again. Then he stood over him and shot him some more, Pinky recounted, the trauma fresh in her voice. Would you step between family members in a heated argument? Tell us your close calls in the comments. Because for Pinky Hale, that moment of hesitation, that split second of not knowing whether to grab her son with the gun, her son being shot, or the baby in her arms, would haunt her for the rest of her life. A moving day, a fresh start, a trivial argument, and 16 bullets that destroyed a family forever. But here's where this case takes a turn that separates it from typical family violence. It wasn't just one shot fired in anger. It wasn't just a momentary loss of control. That first bullet hit Tamir in the shoulder, survivable. A wound that could heal. A mistake that, while serious, wasn't yet fatal. The look on Tamir's face in that moment tells us everything. His whole face was like, "I cannot believe my brother shot me," Pinky recalled. Pure shock. Disbelief. This wasn't supposed to happen between brothers. Tamir, despite being shot, tried to be the peacemaker. All right, knock it off," he said, hands up, attempting to calm his brother down. A reasonable response. A chance to stop this madness before it went too far. But Rodney didn't stop. He kept firing. As Pinky stood frozen, her granddaughter clutched against her chest. She faced an impossible choice that no mother should ever have to make. "I didn't know if I should grab the shooter, or if I should grab the baby, or if I should grab Tamir." In those split seconds, as bullets continued to tear into her oldest son, she calculated terrible math. If she went for Rodney, would he shoot her too? If she went for Tamir, would the baby be in danger? If she ran with the baby, was she abandoning her son to die? "I was willing to die," she said. But in that moment of paralyzing horror, she couldn't move at all. When Tamir turned to try to escape, Rodney shot him in the back. When Tamir fell, Rodney stood over him and kept shooting. The medical examiner would later count 16 separate gunshot wounds. An entire clip emptied into his brother. And then, suddenly, it was over. Rodney seemed to snap back to reality, looking at what he'd done. Without a word, he fled the scene, leaving his mother standing there with a baby in her arms and her son bleeding out on the driveway of what was supposed to be their new beginning. Neighbors called 911. Emergency services arrived, but it was too late for Tamir Dial, dead at 23, gunned down by his own brother while moving furniture on a fall afternoon. And Rodney? He vanished into the streets of Cleveland, a manhunt now underway for a brother killer. For 6 weeks, Rodney Curley Jr. was a ghost. While his family planned Tamir's funeral, while his mother tried to explain to a 1-year-old why Daddy wasn't coming home, while the school where Tamir worked held memorial services, Rodney was in the wind. Cleveland police launched an immediate search, but the trail went cold. The gun used in the killing was never recovered. Leads dried up. The case risked becoming one of those where the killer simply vanishes. A week after the shooting, with Rodney still missing, Pinky Hale made a public plea directly to her son through local news cameras. "Turn yourself in. Don't hurt anybody else. Don't hurt yourself in the process. Just turn yourself in."
Turn yourself in. Don't hurt anybody else. Don't hurt himself in the process.
Raw emotion in her voice was unmistakable. A mother who, despite witnessing her son murder her other son, still feared for his safety, still loved him, still wanted him alive, even if behind bars. But Rodney wasn't listening. Or maybe he was too afraid to face what he'd done. The breakthrough came on November 16th, when the Northern Ohio Violent Fugitive Task Force received intelligence about Rodney's possible location. U.S. Marshals tracked him to a house in the 1800 block of Rayburn Road in Cleveland. The Marshals surrounded the property. They announced their presence. No response. They entered the house, methodically clearing rooms. No sign of Rodney. But they weren't leaving empty-handed. Not with the killer still at large. When they reached the basement, they made their final announcement. Surrender now, or they would release the K-9 unit to find him. That was enough. Faced with the prospect of being hunted down by police dogs in a confined space, Rodney finally emerged from hiding and surrendered without further incident. He was charged with multiple felonies: murder, felonious assault, and aggravated messing. The 19-year-old who had emptied an entire clip into his brother over a furniture argument now faced the possibility of life in prison. The manhunt was over. But for the Hale family, the nightmare was just beginning. Now they would have to relive every moment of that horrific day in court. The Cuyahoga County Courthouse fell silent as Rodney Curley Jr. stood before Judge Margaret Russo. The question hanging in the air was the one everyone wanted answered. Why? Why shoot your own brother 16 times? "I blacked out," Rodney claimed. The judge pressed further, visibly disturbed by the brutality of the crime. "When did you realize what you had done?" "The next day," Rodney replied quietly. This was the defense's strategy, not to deny the shooting, which was witnessed by their own mother, but to paint it as a momentary psychotic break. A split-second decision followed by a complete dissociative state where Rodney kept pulling the trigger without conscious awareness. But prosecutors weren't buying it. They pointed to Rodney's chilling words before the first shot. "I don't flag, I kill. I shoot to kill." Those weren't the words of someone about to black out. Those were the words of someone making a deliberate choice. Behind the scenes, plea negotiations were intense. The prosecution initially pushed for life imprisonment, citing the extreme brutality of emptying an entire clip into a victim who was begging for mercy. The defense fought for a lesser charge, arguing that Rodney had no prior violent felonies, and that this was a tragic, isolated incident. But the most powerful voice in those negotiations belonged to neither the prosecution nor the defense. It belonged to Pinky Hale, a mother in an impossible position. "No amount of time can be put on Tamir's life," she told prosecutors. But she also made it clear she didn't want Rodney to lose his entire life to prison. She was, after all, still his mother, too. As the legal machinery ground forward, the community Tamir had touched continued to mourn. The school where he worked as a security guard closed for a day, an extraordinary gesture that spoke volumes about his impact. Students and staff shared memories of a man who had made them feel safe, who had been a positive presence in their lives, who is a man like no other, the school's statement read. He will not be forgotten, forever 23. Meanwhile, Rodney's attorneys worked to secure a plea deal that would avoid trial, sparing Pinky Hale the trauma of having to testify against one son in the murder of another. Eventually, they reached an agreement. Rodney would plead guilty to involuntary manslaughter, felonious assault, and aggravated menacening. In exchange, 3 other charges would be dismissed. Sentencing recommendation: 18 to 25 years with no possibility of early release. For Pinky Hale, this meant certainty, no appeals, no decades of parole hearings. Her youngest son would serve his time, and perhaps someday she might see him as a free man again, though she would never again see Tamir. As the plea was entered, Rodney stood with his head bowed. The courtroom was packed with Tamir's friends, family, and colleagues, all watching the man who had destroyed so many lives with 16 pulls of a trigger. April 30th, 2024, sentencing day. The courtroom packed with 2 sides of the same family, those mourning Tamir and those supporting Rodney, and in the middle, a mother torn in half. When given the chance to speak, Pinky Hale approached the podium. Her hands trembled. She took a deep breath, looked at her surviving son, and began to speak. "I just really want to say that I love Rodney so much, and I love him so much, and I hate that all this is happening, and I love Tamir so much, and I miss them both so much." She paused, fighting back tears. "But that day was the worst day of my life, because I knew that day I was losing both of my sons." The courtroom fell silent. No legal argument, no expert testimony, no evidence presented throughout the case had captured the true horror of this tragedy like those simple words from a shattered mother. "And I just can't live like this," she continued. "And I know he did what he did, and he ruined my life, and he took Tamir's life, and he ruined his own life. He's so young, and I just want to let him know that I love him no matter what. I love him and I miss him every day." Judge Margaret Russo then turned to Rodney, her expression grave. She had one question that seemed to haunt her. "Why did you keep shooting?" Rodney, barely audible, repeated his claim that he had blacked out. The judge pressed further. "When did you realize that you'd killed your brother?" "The next day," Rodney replied. Judge Russo shook her head slightly, perhaps finding it difficult to comprehend how someone could fire 16 shots without awareness, then announced her decision. 23 years in prison, No possibility of early release. As the sentence was read, Rodney stood motionless. 23 years, the exact age his brother Tamir was when Rodney took his life. A coincidence not lost on anyone in that courtroom. Court officers moved to take Rodney away. He turned to his mother one last time, mouthing, "I'm sorry," before being led out in handcuffs. Pinky Hale watched her second son disappear, not to the grave, but to decades behind bars. Two sons lost in different ways, but lost nonetheless. What would justice look like to you if you were in this mother's shoes? Is 23 years enough for taking a brother's life with 16 bullets? Or is there no sentence that could ever balance this scale? Tell us in the comments. When the courtroom emptied and the news cameras moved on, the true aftermath of this tragedy was just beginning. A 1-year-old child will grow up with only stories of her father. No first day of school drop-offs, no teaching her to ride a bike, no father-daughter dances. Instead, she'll have newspaper clippings, fading photographs, and the heavy knowledge that her uncle took her father away. Pinky Hale returns to a home emptied of both her sons, one buried, one imprisoned. The new house that was supposed to be a fresh start now stands as a monument to loss. Every family gathering, every holiday, every birthday will be marked by 2 empty chairs. The school where Tamir worked lost more than a security guard. They lost someone who made students feel safe, who was a positive male role model in a community that needed more of them. Forever 23 isn't just a saying. It's the cruel reality of potential cut short. And then there are the warning signs that in hindsight flash like neon. Rodney carrying a gun at 19, his troubling associations, the casual way he responded to a challenge with "I don't flag, I kill." These weren't just words. They were previews of capability that went unaddressed until it was too late. One argument. 16 bullets. 2 lives ended in different ways. A family shattered beyond repair, and it all happened in less than 2 minutes. As we close this case, one question haunts us. How many other Rodneys are out there right now? Young men carrying weapons, one insult away from pulling the trigger, one argument away from destroying everything they claim to love. How many families are sitting on this same powder keg, unaware that their normal Tuesday could become their worst nightmare by Wednesday? And what would you do differently if you knew?